Money, money, money must be funny in the rich man's world. Money, money.
Greetings from my beautiful babies, from Castle Gorings, from Mickey, Aurora, and from me. Well, 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 I don't mean to be exultant, but I do have some news for you. So without further ado, I am going to plunge right in. And we have lots of really interesting, juiciful, gorgeous stuff to savor today. The first thing comes from my Miss Marple, who has written, and I cannot say more, but my Miss Marple is quite wonderful. And you know who you are, and thank you so much. My Miss Marple has said, can you let Lady C know, it's done through a certain channel, that some of the more prominent Sussex Squad members are either closing their Twitter/X accounts or busy deleting their anti-monarchy tweets. Their rats are abandoning the sinking ship. Well, you know, when rats aren't being fed, they don't want to stick around. And of course, money is becoming a big, huge issue with the Sussexes. Harry has all sorts of legal expenses. Oh, poor H. Poor H. He might not be able to afford to shut everybody's mouth, so he and his wife can keep theirs open. Wicked, wicked world. So awful. Well, there's that element to it. And there is also another element to it. Samantha's lawyers have been circling. Samantha's lawyers have discovered some really interesting stuff that has literally endangered Meghan and Harry's very existence as public figures. But I will get to that in a little while, because I'm going to link what I know with what has been spoken about on another YouTube channel, and a very good YouTube channel. So, Breezy says, Lady C, maybe you already know Samantha Markle's lawyer, Peter Tichting, has been interviewed on Popcorned Planet. Yes, thanks for bringing it to my attention. Breezy, you weren't the only one. I have been in touch with Samantha, and Samantha has been in touch with me. Oh dear, oh dear. I'm sorry, I'm just crying in sympathy for Megsy baby. To be exposed as a psychopath. Not even your common old god narcissist and black triad personality, but a total psychopath. I'm so beside myself with tears of joy. I'm really being very naughty, sorry. Well, I have looked at both episodes that Andy Signor at Popcorn Planet did when he interviewed Peter Tichting, who is Samantha's lawyer and very capable, very measured, and I would encourage everybody to have a look at those two episodes. In part one, Peter Tichting asserts boldly that Meghan is a psychopath and then proceeds to explain brilliantly, I have to tell you, how a psychopath functions without emotion and gives the game away that they are emotionless. Really very good understanding of psychopathy. He understands the lacunae that psychopaths suffer from, or, well, they don't actually suffer, we suffer, and how they fill their emotional voids with perceived and practiced responses that they have culled from everybody else. And in part two, he deconstructs the assault by the bots on Samantha through Christopher Boozy. And what comes across loud and clear is not only that Christopher Boozy is a self-appointed expert that has no expertise whatsoever, and therefore his claims made in the Netflix program were outrageous, should never have been made, and quite frankly, how a supposedly reputable organization like Netflix fell for it is beyond me. But they're not the only one. The legion of American publications that fell for Christopher Boozy's self-proclaimed expertise, which is totally non-existent, but it actually is very useful to listen to what Peter Tichting says and to compare it with what Andy Signor very well and very competently has executed a comparison which basically shows that all Christopher Boozy's claims about Meghan and Harry being botted were actually basically explaining the technique of how Meghan and Harry and their Sussex Squad were botting everybody else. And Christopher Boozy made the point, it's only a handful of people. And that is the handful that my Miss Marple has referred to. They are being stood down at the moment. Now, why are they being stood down? Is it because Meghan and Harry are running out of money, which evidently they're definitely feeling the pinch, and there's nothing in the pipeline of any consequence, irrespective of all the rubbish that they announce? So, is it financial? Which I suspect in part it is. Or is it that they have realized there's no need to keep on wasting and throwing good money after bad, because the fact of the matter is no one is falling for their lies anymore. The Sussex Squad has been a malevolent, a vicious, nasty, and as Samantha made the point to me just a few minutes before I started this broadcast, that the enormity of what they have done and how Harry and Meghan have set out with the Sussex Squad to discredit not only her, but the royal family as well. And nobody has had any idea of the enormity of what they have done, but it's all coming to the surface. I obviously can't say everything I know, but I think I've given you a jump on what is happening at the moment and how important Samantha Markle's lawsuit against her vicious, lying, deceptive sister, what it's going to bring out, and the filth, that the absolute destructiveness, the totally unbelievable maliciousness, and the calculated way in which the bots that Christopher Boozy was kind enough to explain are only a handful, and he didn't realize when he was pointing the missile at Samantha, he was actually revealing how Meghan's people have done what they have done. The whole thing is brilliant, but wait for it. I've jumped the gun on this, and I'm actually telling you things that without total explanation, I'm giving you the big picture. The detail is going to come out in dribs and drabs. Pammy says, the Epstein files are out. I know you defend the innocence of Prince Andrew on this issue, but new revelations about Prince Andrew and Jane Doe No. 3 are so abhorrent and disgusting, an abhorrent record of Prince Andrew's alleged behaviour. If it's true, then Andrew deserves his banishment and more. However, things to note. Did Andrew know she was a victim of a certain sort of trafficking, which, since this is YouTube, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to use the end syllable of the Sussex's name? And did he know she was underage? Did the king and royal family know about this before the king paraded Prince Andrew and Fergie on Christmas Day at Sandringham? What will the royal family do now? Those are questions that must be answered. Your insights are always valuable. Thank you, Lady C. There is nothing new. There's also nothing true. Jane Doe No. 3 is a Virginia Giuffre. Jane Doe No. 3 has made all sorts of spurious claims which have been proven to be unfounded over the years. And Jane Doe No. 3, Virginia Giuffre, has herself admitted that she was herself a procuress. Unfortunately, Lorena Adriano, who testified about how she was solicited underage by Virginia Roberts, as she then was, died a few months ago, but not before she gave evidence in Ghislaine Maxwell's trial. You notice Virginia Giuffre wasn't called to give evidence. And you know why? Because Virginia Giuffre would be torn apart on the witness stand and exposed for what she is. And as for her claims that she was being trafficked, sorry, and that she was underage, these are claims that have been shot down repeatedly as being utterly untrue. She didn't meet Jeffrey Epstein until she was a few days short of her 17th birthday, whereafter she was overaged. She wasn't underaged anymore. Her father used to drive her to the airport. So much for trafficking. That's her own evidence, incidentally. She wasn't underage. She was never underage where Epstein was concerned. And she told Lorena Adriano, who was underage, to make sure they didn't discover she was underage. Now, what does that tell you? I know what it tells me. You know, if I had any reason to believe that Virginia Giuffre was the angel that she's now trying to pretend she is, I would be the first one to condemn what people had done to her. But she was a trust fund babe. She was not some piece of trash off the street. She was no disadvantaged creature either. She was from a comfortable family, comfortable enough for her to have a trust fund. And she, at a very early age, was totally off the rails with all sorts of substances and what she did to achieve the money for those substances. The fact that she was underage at that time has nothing whatsoever to do with Prince Andrew. And I have said it again. Sorry, I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again. Prince Andrew's tastes don't run in that direction. There's nothing new in that, except that she is listed as Jane Doe 3 instead of Virginia Roberts Giuffre, which anybody who knows anything about the case knows that is who Jane Doe 3 is. Also, in Little St. James, the age of consent is 18, and she, by her own admission, was 18. I'm sorry. I don't believe one word out of that greedy woman's mouth. I have a lot of sympathy for the people she has made suffer. I have a lot of sympathy for her parents and the terrible predicament in which they found themselves. I have no sympathy for anything that Virginia Giuffre has claimed that she is a victim of, because, you know, bad seeds start young. They don't all of a sudden jump out and become bad seeds after the age of consent, or sometimes once puberty kicks in. I have no sympathy whatsoever for her, because I do not believe a word out of her mouth, having unfortunately learnt too much about the matter. You want to have sympathy for her? Please feel free to do so. There's nothing wrong in sympathizing with a wrongdoer, but don't for a second believe that there is anything new in those papers that actually incriminates Prince Andrew. I hope I've made myself very clear on this matter. Gabriella Gayton says, "Hi, Lady C. Happy New Year to you too, my dear. I was wondering if you know what's happening with H. He hasn't popped up in a while. Could he be at rehab? Oh dear. That will be when pigs fly. And not a second before. And pigs aren't flying in Montecito yet, but they are flying at Castle Goring. And they're doing him no good. He's not in rehab, but my understanding is that they are both under a tremendous amount of pressure, financial and otherwise. They are looking at the wreckage of all of their plans. And evidently, 1 minute everything is copacetic, and the next it's at each other's throats. Very volatile. Do I have any sympathy for them? I have sympathy for their victims. That's who I have sympathy for. Rehab. He belongs in rehab. He also needs lessons in morality, in my view, in ethics, in my view, in treating people correctly, in my view, in not moaning and groaning about how, for instance, Dominic West deserved to be cut out of his life because Dominic West gave a perfectly innocent interview about what they had got up to after their trek. So he thought that Dominic West had invaded his privacy, but he didn't think a thing of invading Prince William's privacy, did he? To such an extent that we all now know the state of Prince William's male member. Charming. Do you begin to see the outrageousness of all these people who speak out of both sides of their mouths and on the one hand make claims that on the other hand their actions condemn? I mean, so it's okay for them to do it, but nobody else should. And they should always get a free pass. I'm sorry, I don't give myself or anybody else a free pass unless you show some awareness of the offense you have caused, the damage you have wrought. And that's called wanting to be forgiven. But if you don't want, if you will not admit to an error, why should you not be put on the stock that you really belong in? That's my take on it. Tough, but life is tough. Life is tough. And when you are in a position of privilege and you are in a position where you can actually damage people and institutions, and I am now referring to both Virginia Giuffre and Harry, you have a responsibility to actually behave decently and not glorify yourself and conceal your failings and present them as if they're virtues while trashing everybody else. Sorry, I don't know about you, but I think I know the difference between right and wrong. And I know the difference between malice and between fake, oh, I deserve sympathy. No, you don't. Gwen Erickson said, "Me again is such a fraud. She said it herself." I would hate to disagree with her. I would hate to disagree with her. She's not only the fraud that she has admitted to being, but she is a malicious fraud at that. Wait for all the filth to be exposed, not only in the trial that's coming up, Markle versus Markle, Samantha versus Meghan, but wait for the other filth that's coming. 2024 is going to be a year of redemption. The only thing is, who's going to be redeemed and who is going to be reviled? And are chickens coming home to roost? Especially with chicken foot people? Let's wait and see. A concerned Brit says, 2 questions please, Lady C. How can Carol Vorderman call Lord Shaun Bailey a misogynist? And 2, your thoughts on Monroe Bergdorf being appointed UN Women UK's first champion for females. To those of you who are foreign, these are both very British scenarios. Carol Vorderman is an intelligent woman who's attractive. She is now, I would imagine, batting 60. She's an attractive woman and she's in very good shape for her age. And she is physically attractive. Of course, she looks as if she walked past a plastic surgeon's rooms, and not only did she ask that she be pumped up front, but back as well, and she flaunts her wares in the most distasteful manner in my view, and in Shaun Bailey's view as well. Now, to those of you who don't know, Shaun Bailey is a black lord. He was recently made a lord. He ran for mayor of London and would have been a far better mayor of London than the mayor that we have now. I've met him and his wife. They are delightful. They are very intelligent, very sound, very down to earth, really salt of the earth people. And he basically said, and I couldn't agree with him more, that Carol Vorderman is at an age where she should stop flaunting her wares, or maybe hawking them would be a better description. So she called him a misogynist. No, Carol Vorderman, he's not a misogynist. He's a man with dignity, and it would behoove you to develop a little bit, because some of not only your conduct but your statements are really quite revolting. For instance, she makes no bones about the fact that she intends to drive several cars at the same time and doesn't see any necessity to be faithful to any one make of a vehicle, if you get my drift. Well, I know what that used to be called, and I'm not even going to bother to call her it. But in my opinion, Shaun Bailey didn't go far enough. She also is offensively political, and she thinks that because she is a pneumatic, that she can wiggle, waggle, woggle, and condemn. She is, in my opinion, totally distasteful. So do I think he is a misogynist? No. Do I think how can she call him a misogynist? She may be bright in maths, but she clearly doesn't understand the English language or good taste. Now, as for my thoughts on Monroe Bergdorf being appointed UN Women's UK's first champion for females. You know, I used to sit on the fundraising committee for the United Nations Association in the 70s, 80s and 90s. It was in those days headed up by a dear friend of mine called Peter Ripley. I have to say, the United Nations has gone from an organization of undoubted eminence to an organization of doubtful repute. And who has been appointed the UK's women's champion for females? Monroe Bergdorf. Now, Monroe Bergdorf is half Jamaican, half English, and I like to see my Jamaicans flourish. Sorry, I do. But she is wildly inappropriate in all ways for the appointment, but she has been appointed because she ticks all sorts of extraordinary boxes. She has never been a champion for women's rights generally, or had she been through the fire as a champion of women's rights, and indeed of the rights of ordinary people, as well as ordinary and extraordinary women, you could say there was some justification for the appointment. But there's absolutely none. She is a good-looking woman who started out life as male. Now, I'm not knocking her for that. I wouldn't even actually have knocked the appointment had she been an older transsexual who had done a lot of activistic work for women. But why is she, a relatively young individual, being appointed? And not only that, because she has no track record, but her track record, such as it is absolutely disastrous. In February 2017, she stated, and I'm going to quote, "All white people as a group are brought up racist." I suppose that included her mother. She continued, "Most of y'all don't even realize or refuse to acknowledge that your existence, privilege, and success as a race is built on the backs, blood, and death of people of color." Well, that is so actually politically, let me rephrase that. That is so historically farcical as to be unbelievable. Is she not aware that until the latter part of the 20th century, most white people also had to fight for their rights? Has she forgotten that? No, she hasn't even thought of it. She hasn't remembered it. So there are all these magical white people, privileged. What about the coal miners? What about the workers who had to go on strike in the earlier years of the 20th century? I mean, is she a fool or just a race baiter? And I think she is a race baiter. Well, she was appointed by L'Oreal to be one of their representatives. She lasted a few weeks because they dumped her when she claimed that all white people were guilty of racial violence and that the white race was the most violent and oppressive force of nature on earth. What about a volcano? What about the ocean? What about a drought? I mean, the hysterical nonsense that comes out of this individual's mouth. Well, in response to those comments, L'Oreal dropped her. She also, the following year, was appointed by the Labour Party as an LGBT advisor. Well, she was forced to resign the following month. This was in February 2018. She was forced to resign the following month when a host of Twitter posts from 2010 with grossly homophobic and misogynistic comments that had come straight out of her mouth were revealed. And she is somebody who is going to be championing women's rights. Even if she had been born 120% female, she has absolutely no right to be appointed as the UK champion for the UN women's rights. I mean, unbelievable. But you know, we are living in a world that is mad and inconsistent and actually flaunting the most offensive disrespect for people, in my view. Now, as I say, I don't base my objections on her birth. I base my objections on her ideas, on her racist, activist, politically destructive demeanor in the past. I think it's very unfortunate that she has been appointed. I suppose that's the UN's version of Anheuser-Busch. And on that note, I will now read out what GMH says. We are hearing a lot here about Justin Trudeau's holiday trip to Jamaica, which caused a furore in April on his last trip and has raised the same issues this time. His claim that he's not costing the Canadian taxpayer anything thanks to largesse from family friends, Peter Green and family. That's nonsense, of course. There are security costs for RCMP protection, securing the property, etc., etc. People here have had a tough Christmas thanks to our failing economy and constantly rising taxes levelled by the Liberal government. The last thing anyone thought that he'd do after the poor optics of the prior vacation was go to Jamaica again. There is some talk here about the Green family's connections going back to Pierre Trudeau and continuing today in connection with the PET Foundation, with which Justin's brother is involved. I've been doing some digging. Justin Trudeau is one of the most slippery politicians this nation has ever had in the Prime Minister's office. Many of us who originally supported him see this. In my case, I'll be voting Conservative for the first time in my adult life. We are hoping Conservative opposition leader Pierre Poilievre, sorry, I don't know how it's pronounced, can keep the momentum and win a majority in 2025, or that, as we also hope, Trudeau takes a walk in the snow like his father and we get an election this year. Hope springs eternal. Well, that's very interesting because I know who's written this, and it's a very eminent person, and it's very balanced, and it's very sound, and I know where Justin Trudeau was staying. I've stayed there. Peter Green's wife was Mary Jean Mitchell. She was the only child of Sir Harold and Lady Mitchell. Lady Mitchell's name, incidentally, was also Mary, but the mother was Mary and the daughter was Mary Jean. And she was a very, very good friend of one of my oldest and closest friends. There was a slight age difference between me and this very good friend of mine, and I think there was more or less a similar age difference between me and Mary Jean Mitchell. But for whatever reason, I mean, we really were not friends, in quotes, while growing up, because she was not educated in Jamaica. She didn't live in Jamaica all the time. She only visited. And we had our own crowd or circle or whatever word you want to use. And she was more an expat. And when we were growing up, we didn't have that much time for visitors. And also, the truth is that even though the Mitchells' house was beautiful, and they have a series of houses, incidentally, but the main house is really rather lovely, and the other houses are nice too, but the beach is spectacular. It is the finest beach on the island of Jamaica, and beaches in Jamaica are open to the public, or the public. It's not possible to own beach land in Jamaica. It's accessible to all. However, the Prospect Beach is surrounded by the Prospect Plantation, and it's in its own cove. So the only way you can access it publicly is from the sea. And of course, nobody's going to be able to access it from the sea. So it is effectively one of the few beaches in Jamaica that is totally private by being inaccessible. Well, Mary Jean sadly got breast cancer in her mid-30s. And she and Peter Green had 2 sons, and she tragically died at the age of 38. There is a foundation, the Mary Jean Mitchell Green Foundation in Canada, that deals with breast cancer. There is also the Mitchell Green Foundation in Jamaica that supports things like Prospect College. The family has done a tremendous amount for the local community in Jamaica. They have always been committed to doing a lot of good for the people in their areas. And I mean, they own property all over. They own property in Honduras, in Jamaica, in Canada, in Switzerland. I think they even own an island in Fiji. Sir Harold was a financial genius, and he, I think for a while, was the vice chairman of the Conservative Party. And he also decided after the war with the socialist government in the United Kingdom that he wasn't wasting his time having his money gobbled up by high taxes in the United Kingdom, and pretty much moved out of the United Kingdom into Switzerland, Canada, Jamaica, and they used to visit. As I said, my parents knew Sir Harold and Lady Mitchell, and when I would have met them, I sort of remember her. I think I remember him, but that's, you know, they didn't mean anything to me at the time. So, but I hope that gives a picture of the family. But, you know, it's rich people will give politicians the right to stay in their houses, irrespective of whether they completely agree with their politics or not. Money and power often go hand in hand, even if one wants to wear gloves so that the other doesn't contaminate one. Let me put it that way. It doesn't come as a surprise to me that Justin Trudeau has availed himself of the Green family's hospitality for the second time. It's a beautiful house. It's in a beautiful area. Prospect is in Ocherius, and it's magnificent. Everything about it is magnificent. And there are several houses, incidentally, on the plantation. It's not just one. But the main house is very, very comfortable. None of them, I would have said, was particularly splendiferous. I mean, Jamaican plantation houses may be gracious and elegant, but they're not vulgar. And there's nothing vulgar about the Mitchell money. It's really substantial money. I'm afraid Justin Trudeau is something that Canadians have to deal with. We have our own problems here, starting with Mr. Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, who, if we don't get rid of him, he's already turned London into Lahore on the Thames. He's going to turn it into Lahore in the Thames. That's where it's going to sink to, because he has just ruined London. Very sad, but very true. I just don't understand. I do understand, actually. I was going to say, I don't understand why politicians nowadays are so inept at actually fulfilling their duty to the populace as a whole. I do understand it, though. It's because they pander to the worst aspects of democracy, and they encourage people by selling the people a load of lies that are unsustainable and false hope. We need politicians who have the moral fiber to say, this is something we need to do, that is something we mustn't do, instead of trying to get votes by ultimately selling out the interests of all the people in a country just to maintain a group of supporters who will vote them into power time and again. This is turning out to be a big flaw in democracy. I'm not sure what the answer is beyond having responsible politicians and a responsible electorate. Because if we always think that we must get more. I mean, I, for instance, yes, live in a castle, but all the furniture is old. I have clothes that are 50-something years old. You know, we need to start to conserve and not waste. That's my view on it. And we need to understand that if you're sitting down, you can't have the benefits of standing up. And if you're standing up, you can't have the benefits of sitting down. So, let's see what happens with Mr. Trudeau. But, of course, it's costing the Canadian government some money if Mr. Trudeau is in Jamaica. But I don't think, in fairness to Mr. Trudeau, that it's going to cost him, the government, beyond the salaries and the flights of the people who are protecting him, because the Mitchell Green family is very generous, and there are several houses on the plantation, and I'm pretty sure everything was laid on gratis. That's what a good host does. And on that note, I'll say thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been of some interest to you. Please, if it has, keep the questions and comments coming in so I will know what you would like us to be speaking about. Okay? Thank you so much. God bless and goodbye. And if you have truly enjoyed this, please like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and Godspeed.